As we look forward to concluding this unit, we're going to kind of be covering a lot of things that we've mentioned about in the previous lectures. So, with this, be prepared to hear a lot of repeat content, which is meant to reinforce what we're trying to teach you here. So, learning objectives are going to be to identify the firewall and network security management best practices. The key concepts are the best practices for network security management tools, preventing and deterring incidents, incident response, and network security assessments, testing, and troubleshooting. So, the essentials of network security management. At the very beginning of the course, we talked about the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality means keeping things secret. It equates to encryption. Integrity means to show that the information is unaltered, and uh, and this can be done using like hashing of your information. Hash files provide checksums for that purpose. And then availability, which means the business should always have access to data processes, systems, and their data. Now, you want to kind of consider building your security around the concepts of deterrence, detection, and delay. Deterrence is where you have put up such uh, security measures that uh, any intruder would probably go on to look for an easier target. So if they see there's a lot of things out there and it's not easy to be in, they'll move on to something easier. So most common burglars will look for the open window, the unlocked car door, stuff like that, out there, unlocked doors, etc. Uh, Later, it takes more skill to like learn to pick locks, smash a window, or do other things like that. Uh, you want to make yourself not an easy opportunity. Detection in this instance is if you have a number of things out there where you can detect people that are or spots or processes that should not be running or should not be accessing certain uh, resources. You want to be able to have that create alerts, and that's usually done through a SIM or event logging, uh, and event monitoring, those kind of things like that, which help with that detection. And ever vigilant monitoring and alerting is something that needs to be done on a continuous basis. And then the last one is about delay. So you want to create gaps between spaces for where the detection can initiate. You want to have those extra hops in there. Like if you have a firewall DMZ, multiple firewalls, and separation of things like that. So these are other things that help out there. The other parameters for security design are the prevention. So you want to prevent everything by making sure it's out there. And make sure your defenses are there to prevent people. You don't want to leave things. And this includes going and looking at your policies and making sure your security firewall rules prevent access from going through. Uh, you want to also have that detection built in to where if something is not successful or if you notice somebody is prodding around, you are going to be alerted. And then you want to have a quick response, and those who are doing the monitoring would like to go ahead and interact and kind of see what they can do to respond to uh, quarantine anything that might be amiss until it's later investigated. So, essential security management. Do not rely on a single or individual defenses. Know your limitations of what your product can do. Don't think your uh, firewall can do everything under the sun like a Swiss Army knife can. There's not really any true Swiss Army knives in security. There's a lot of them that are specialized tools that are meant for certain things out there. Uh, Always make the assumption that everything is inherently insecure. If you go with that jaded attitude that everything is kind of like, oh, Danger Will Robinson, this might be affected, somebody's eventually going to pop it. Yeah, you're better off by looking at ways to secure even your security products. So, yeah. Um, you want to develop a policy for testing everything, all code before it goes into production and all that. You want to make sure everything is tested properly. You want to also develop and implement a patch management system. Everyone's familiar with the Microsoft Patch Tuesday. There's a lot of other application vendors that provide incremental patches. These are to be noted and implemented and have a policy in place in your organization in which those can be addressed, tested, and implemented as soon as possible. Uh, Most people don't consider hardening their internal systems. They're like, well, I have a hard firewall on the outside. Nothing gets through my firewall. There's nothing that can get through. Da, da, da. Well, that's great that you have exterior shells, but it's like an M&M. Once that shell is cracked, you got something nice and soft in the middle. So you want to also harden your internal host. Make sure if somebody does crack that outer perimeter network and perimeter shell, they can get in, and if they get in, and when they get in, you can make sure that they have another obstacle which they're trying to get through, and they don't have easy access once they're inside that area. And then you want to plan for failures, errors. The greatest security vulnerability is people, and those who work for you and with you. They make mistakes. These errors can cause downtime, what looks like a security breach, etc. These are actually issues where they compromise availability. You also want to be able to respond to intrusions or unexpected downtime by having business continuity plans and failover and stuff like that. All right. Well, here we go. Here's an example of defense in depth. Remember, Shrek is like an onion, and onions have layers. And here we have an asset with, here we have antivirus, malware inspection, host inspection, host firewall, policies that are applied, hardening. So all of these things can be considered defense in depth, and it's kind of a visual graph of what that's supposed to look like. All right, so here we have the essentials of network security continued. So assume you're always going to be a victim of a DOS attack. Not if, but when. Somebody's always going to hit you up, just out of so just eventually any organization will eventually have something like this happen to them. Do not assume that a service or protocol is secured by another layer or service. Oh yeah, my application's secure. It's password protected. But there's a lot of other things that might be exposed to it. You might also, they might attack the system and find out that the system itself has a password of, it's username access of admin and password 123 or something like that, and they get in and get on that. So you always want to make sure you harden everything and make sure everything is secured from all aspects. You're going to have to always learn from your mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, especially when they're new to a system, new to an organization. Learn from mistakes, learn from others' mistakes also. That's always something to keep in mind. Practice the KISS method of keeping it simple. It is really important to make sure that if everything is simple, simple things can be easily followed. Making something too complex introduces more avenues for errors to occur. So if you have a lot of simple rules to take place instead of having all these complex ones, the more complex it is, the harder it is to keep track of. So you always want to try and keep everything simple. You always want to ensure the usability of the system once the safeguards are in place. Um, I had a instructor when he was working. Um, they had a Department of Defense hardening guide, and that's called a STIG. Uh, he thought he was going to be really smart, and his coworkers say, "Don't apply the STIG." Well, he said, "Well, the rules and regulations say we have to apply the STIG." So he applied the STIG to it while he was building the system. And the STIG is a set of policies preordained that hardens everything up. At that point, he applied the STIG, and then he noticed he lost access to the system. Um, he even lost local access to the system. And the system ended up having to be flattened and rebuilt from scratch because once the STIG was applied, uh, the safeguards were so overwhelming and overbearing on everything. It removed access from everyone from ever even making that a usable system. So you want to avoid things like that. Um, you want to prioritize things. Learn to prioritize. That's always an important thing on determining what is the thing of greatest need of what has to be addressed now, what can be addressed later, what's a low-hanging fruit you can do real quick, and count that as a win. That's my advice to you. Learn to prioritize. And it's also very important to know your own network. So you have to know where your zones are, what your networks are, where things are at. The faster you get to know your network, the better it is for you to be able to administer security on it. Um, Once you know your network, you should be able to like critically search your network for flaws. Out there, you're just going to kind of help out, look for places where something is not right. A lot of times you'll find your network guys will miss things and they'll misroute subnets. They'll have overlapping subnets deployed. Um, it's part of your job to catch that because what gets blamed if there's a network error? Your firewalls and network security are always going to blame that first. So if you want to be a network security engineer, you have to be a network engineer first. And then you have to have the security on top of that. You need to be realistic out there. Honestly, be realistic about what can be done based on your budget and your capabilities. Uh, you're not going to be able to create the same defenses as, say, a you know U.S. federal agency that has almost seamlessly unrealistic and unrealistic resources where they have so much things to do and so much to protect. So you have to be realistic and you have to apply with what you can based on what you can afford. Um, know your threats. It's always good to be aware of different things you can do to look at your systems out there and know what kind of threats might be vulnerable to them. You can do this through threat modeling. Threat modeling is an exercise of where you uh, examine threats. You can look at MITRE, CAPEC, and MITRE Defend, and they have a list of a lot of threats that you can utilize that are pre-made that you can use to evaluate your network. You also, golden rule here, number 2, always implement the principle of least privilege. So everything should be least privilege out there. You don't want to allow uh, scope creep of privileges. So if somebody is a network administrator on your group and they changed groups and they became, say, a manager of a, like, say, fire, or let's say a different organization, and they change roles, make sure their privileges get removed. It's always important to make sure throughout your organization least privilege happens. Uh, you know, for your eyes only, loose link, loose lip sink ships type of thing. You do not want to allow access to information that does not need to be exposed to those who do not need to see it. Also, you want to employ separation of duties. So, based on their skills, some people who are monitoring, you probably want them to not be able to, like, if they're doing all the monitoring of your firewalls and stuff in the network or SOC, Network Operations Center, Security Operations Center, and they find alerts coming through. They should be able to investigate it and determine what rule. Yet they should not be allowed and having the privilege to maybe modify that rule and change it so it works. Instead, they should, follow a process or procedures where you might have to open a ticket, or they might have to contact a person who has the ability to make an administrative rule change of that, where they can follow those process and procedures for those things. So this way, it creates a double check and a sanity check to validate that these items are what they say, and they can do some more than one set of hands and eyes on something to make a change, which could affect other things out there. Um, Knowing your threats also, which also means you should also know your vulnerabilities. You should have a list of software and products. You should visit the NVD, National Vulnerability Database out there. That's published off of NIST, NIST.gov out there, and you can go ahead and look at the different things for the different vulnerabilities that are produced out there. And once you have your list of software, cross-reference it with what's listed on here and determine if there needs to be patches that you weren't aware of. So network security management tools always have a written security policy. Security policies are great to have that provide guidance and a framework for everything. Have that security checklists. Checklists are great for everything, for all procedures. I like to call checklists or procedures. These are procedural documents that you go through. You kind of check them off to make sure everything is done. So we have uniform results and no steps get skipped. Kind of attitude there for that. Make sure you have a complete inventory of all hardware and software and you keep it up to date. Things that get decommissioned need to be removed or put in a decommissioned state. They need to be software. If software gets updated, make sure your inventory database shows the current version of the software that's been implemented. Make notes of what it was implemented from. Uh, Physical cabling layout. Always have a map of your data center showing where things are at in case you need to run in the data center or have somebody run into it. You can tell them the grid sector to go to and, hey, it's the third one from the bottom rack, and you need to unplug that red cable type of thing. Always have that layout device map available. Um, Always keep your logical organization, addressing, and subnetting maps. All right, this is different than a physical map because that's your cable. Next one is, you have a map of your subnets of what are the different things on those subnets, what addresses, what systems are on them, and all of that. Next you want to have is complete configuration documentation for every device. Okay, so once you have complete configuration documentation for every device, you can then kind of cross-reference that, vulnerability database. You can know what you have, your subnet, your physical location of it. These are all great things to have out there. Um, You also want to make sure you maintain and keep good change documentation and logs. Why? Because the first thing I ask whenever we're doing troubleshooting is what changed. Once the what changed can be provided, we can move forward and examine, last known working state, and then we can look forward to, seeing what might be affected, what, if any of the changes could have affected the situation where we have an incident where something is not working. And then make sure you have good backup and restoration procedures because, yep, we take backups every week. How do we restore it? I don't know. That happens more often than you think. They take backups, but nobody's ever practiced doing a restore. It's always important to do a restore. Let's say if you had a hardware failure, you grab a new server, you throw it in the rack, you plug it in, and you want to restore your data to that new server. Well, you have to get that restoration process available and have that checklist available for that. Always keep an incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery strategies available to review. These should be constantly practiced. You need to practice them. Once you review them after you did a practice test for any of these disaster recovery, incident response, business continuity exercises, you want to go back and say what went well, what went wrong. All right, and then you see how to go back, tweak these strategies and how to make them better in the long run. All right. Always have troubleshooting guidelines. Have like that little checklist. You know, hey, this work. Hey, my I can't get to this certain website anymore. Uh, you know, the scripts that your help desk asks. These are those things. Sir, can you get to another website? Yes. Have you rebooted? Yes. Etc. These are the kind of things that are checklists to have them reviewed and analyzed. Um, Always keep your hardware and software documentation available. Review those and keep those out there so that we have a good copy of those so we can make a reference. A lot of times these come on PDF formats. More and more you're seeing these just as part of a vendor website. Uh, Also know what your skills are. Know who has what skills in your organization. Keep track of them because you never know when you might need to call on that old graybeard out there who likes to sit there, walk around, and drink coffee because he might have that skill for those systems that not a lot of people ever touch or move anymore. So always keeping an idea on who can be out there, who can be utilized, who can be called in to help out with certain items. Okay. And then always make sure you try and have some kind of access to online resources. I usually keep a cellular modem available in case my home modem goes out. Nowadays, it's easy to tether a cell phone to your laptop. So in case your internet resources are declined, something happens to them, you can use another method to get out to the internet to get online resources to uh, review resources for help, out there. So, security plan, security policy, and security checklists. I've been harping on this for a while, but your security plan and your security policy, they're the foundation of anything, any endeavor. Everything always has to start with a written plan. Um, to do this, you must understand the organization's infrastructure, the organization's mission and their goals, and the process necessary to produce its products and services. So we do not want to make any kind of security policy or procedure or plan that might interfere with any of these things going out there. Let's say if there's something that makes company, Acme that makes widgets, um, and you implement a policy that says you're not, the security plan does not allow for any widgets to be made or ordered online through a computer or something like that. That's going to hurt the business. So you kind of want to avoid doing something like that. The written security policy always establishes that start of the documentation trail, and you must regularly review it and modify it. And you can do versioning. Always keep track of versions. Save the old version for reference, create a new version of it. Also, a security checklist, and these are used to validate every countermeasure, safeguard, security control, deterrent, prevention, defense. Anything you have should have a checklist of a procedure of what to do. If you're making a new build, it should have the procedure for that. If you're doing a rule change, you should have a security checklist for that. Everything should have different checklists assigned to them. Security checklist, it should include every security control deployed for facility control. All right, so this is something that is kind of interesting because should have a control deployed for every facility. What are we talking about with facility? We're talking about the housing of that system. So the data center. If data center A, gets hit by a tornado, you're going to have a security checklist on not only failing over to another data center, but how to get in there and look to recover the equipment that might have potentially uh, that will have information stored on those devices that should not be made available. So in case you have some kind of issue, you should also make plans to have a way to get in there and recover in case you have a facility issue. A lot of times how these happen, maybe floods happen or something like that. So these are some things out there for facility control. This comes to after some natural disasters occurred and they have damaged data centers, and then people were picking through the data centers through rubble and looking at for anything to salvage. And these were not necessarily the employees of the company. They were just grabbing stuff and looking to sell things, and therefore, what might have been just innocently, trying to steal a computer and sell it, they were actually selling stuff that was much more valuable, the information contained within those systems. So, limiting network access and implementing encryption. Well, everyone loves to say that the internet should be limited and connectivity should be filtered. That's mainly HR driven right now because it's not really for security, but it's to keep people from looking at things they shouldn't look at on the internet while they're at work, which could cause a people issue to happen. So these are really HR driven policies, but they also have another benefit to IT where they help create data exfiltration obstacles for potential insider attackers. So, as they set up filtering and create only sites that should be allowed to go out to, they limit that, and then therefore um, exfiltration of data from maybe an insider threat is kind of obstructed. You also want to implement multi-factor authentication. Remember we talked about that. Multi-factor is something you have and something you know. So I know my password, and then I have a token that will, some kind of a token or cat card with a certificate on there, or some kind of device where I can enter a one-time PIN on there. those are some things that occur for multi-factor authentication. Um, don't rely on authentication at system initiation. So a lot of programs in the past, they would only authenticate you once. And if that session was maintained for days, weeks, months, all was good. If that session got hijacked, hey, well, they already are authenticated. So that would be the problem there. So you want to do multiple authentications during a set amount of time. So uh, for that purpose, so there, you can kind of head off session hijacking and limit the damage it could do. You kind of want to eliminate or limit remote access to those that don't need it. If you are allowing remote access into your network, make sure it's for a specific use purpose, and those access to resources are limited to least privilege out there. So that's limiting the remote access. You want to restrict access, default deny, then default allow. So anything at my work I want to get into that's new, I click on it and I'm asked to, why do I want it? I have to ask for permission to get it. So I have to submit a access rights management request for any new resource that I want to try and get access to. And then it gets turned off after, let's say, 30 days of non-use. So if I don't use it, you lose it. You want to employ device and file encryption, and this could be something as hard drive encryption. In case your system gets stolen, they can't decrypt the hard drive. File encryption is at the file level, which the files, if they're intercepted or something, those files are harder to decrypt. So if something data were to be stolen, you have file level encryption and disk level encryption. That should provide you with enough safeguards for that matter. You want to encrypt your network traffic too. That could be using application layer security such as SSH for sending files, or you can use TLS for encrypting your data, or even IPsec for encrypting your network traffic. All right, and then you want to do a whitelist application control. This is everything else is denied except what's on the allow list or whitelist out there. The allow list will provide all systems that are allowed to make a connection to or from your resource. So let's talk about some physical security. This is the prevention of direct physical access to a system by unauthorized individuals. All right, so you don't want people going into your servers, your firewalls, into your data center without them being authorized. This includes facilities that resist forcible entry. So if any of you have ever gone into a data center, you usually have to pass a security desk or you have to be buzzed into the security office or to the main lobby. Then you'll be met with security officers, often armed. After that point, you have to go through another set of security doors, and then you'll go down a hallway, and there'll be a number of doors to different areas of different data centers, because the data centers are compartmentalized, and you have to get access through that door there. A lot of times, if you're not a regular employee at that data center, you'll be required to be escorted either by a security person or by uh, another employee. So you have different access to physical access. These are barriers for that. And there's a lot of things out there that prevent you from happening. The doors lock. Um, a lot of times they'll have to look at your devices in the secure areas so you don't have tampering of them. And if you do have to bring like your own laptop or your work laptop and into there needs to be written reason why you have to have your personal laptop or your assigned laptop, your assigned work laptop with you for these things. I went to one location in Bogota, Colombia, and this was for a banking entity in South America. All the guards at this location, well, first we had to drive into a gated area. The gated area was behind very thick walls. We parked in the parking area. Then we had to go past some more armed guards carrying M16s. Not AR-15s, but fully automatic M16s. We went through there, and then we went to the to their main lobby of the bank, and it was a business office, but they also had the data center, and so we took the elevator underground to the data center, where we were met with more armed guards. And then for me to get through there, I was also being monitored by CCTV, and I had to go through a revolving drawer man trap type of device. You know, it opens up, you step inside, and then the tube closes. This one had a weight. It weighed you as you went in because they gave you a temporary badge. You badged in, you went in, and it identified you and told you how much you weighed going in, and that meant with what you were carrying. Now, I wasn't thinking. We went to lunch. I exited through there, uh, and I got locked in the tube because I weighed less leaving than I did coming in because I didn't have my backpack with my laptop and my other things with me. And that was significant enough variance to where they had to call security. They opened me back up and told me, get my backpack, and I'm not supposed to leave my backpack in there to leave to go to lunch. So that was, one of the more advanced ones. So these are some of the things that you have out there. Other things are like the card key entry, the burglar alarms, motion detector, security cameras, and all that prevent these kind of tampering incidents into these physical security of these devices. So the techniques for preventing and deterring incidents, compartmentalization. A lot of times you're going to hear the term zero trust security. Well, zero trust security is based around creating compartments or zones of trust. These can be done on a programming level all the way up to a network level. For programming, they talk about creating like memory spaces, all that. Areas of where you're writing the program's allowed to run in a certain memory space, and anything to or from that outside of that program's allotted space gets denied by the system. So basically, compartmentalization by the book says it's a element infrastructure design that takes into account the likelihood of a security breach by malicious code or something other intruder. It keeps it isolated to certain areas. These entrance to and from these compartmentalized areas is controlled by a policy enforcement point, and that policy enforcement points enforces policy based on your policy systems. So that could be your policy enforcement point between zones could be firewalls out there, and they can control who gets in and out. Another way to deter incidents is to find out how they plan on attacking you. And you can set up a honeypot out there. A honeypot is a system that kind of looks like it has some valuable information, and it's part of a legitimate network, but it's actually kind of a trap. On my old network, when I was younger, I set up basic honey traps out there all the time. I'd create some virtual servers and publish them unfiltered to the internet, let everything go on them, and I could kind of monitor and see what was happening to them. But they were compartmentalized. There was no way they could escape their VM area because I had them I configured my VMs so they were isolated only to that, and I had a firewall rule that published everything to those sites, so they didn't really detect the firewall. To them, it seemed like, this old Windows NT 4.0 system with everything enabled on it, admin password. The only thing I did is I had extensive logging, and I would see what people would do to try and get into my system. That was always fun. A honeynet is just a whole network of honeypots out there, and then that leads us up to the padded cell concept out there. Now, this is where you have an IDS IPS out there that is working in conjunction with a kind of a honeypot, and if it detects some uh, anomaly in traffic or detects somebody's trying to do something bad, the IDS will redirect that traffic to a padded cell, which is kind of just basically another honeypot where they can kind of transfer that attacker to attack that, and then they can waste their time playing with a dummy system that you can turn around and wipe and then reestablish in a couple minutes. So that's always fun to do. All right, so here is kind of what that looks like visually. So we have the real workstations there from the internet. Traffic gets blocked. Um, then it gets redirected over to the honeypot systems through that padded cell. So hey, we're gonna attack all these, and we're allowing these attacks to happen, and we kind of watch what they're doing and watch what techniques they use, and we can make sure that our real systems are blocking those kind of techniques. Some of the techniques for preventing and deterring incidents, the antivirus scanners out there, anti-malware devices are great. They help malware detection. Best practice, engines should be updated at least once a year. You should have your signature files updated multiple times per day. Book says once a day. Uh, these things are updated sometimes every 45 minutes nowadays. They should be configured to be perform complete system-wide low-level scans across all memory and storage at least once a week. You need to perform your thing. Host software is a good. Host firewalls are really good to have and have them configured for that. Whole drive encryption like BitLocker should be implemented. And then the first golden rule of IT, backup, backup, backup. Always make sure you have backups online, off-site, on-site, online or cloud storage backups are also good to have out there for you too. So next we talk about the weakest link in all of IT security, people. Uh, People are the weakest link. So training, awareness, and ongoing education for people is an essential part of security. Uh, the goal of security-related training is behavior modification. Okay, we want to teach folks how to do the right thing. And sometimes you might have to participate in training sessions or making videos for that to help train your users out there. You may want to create security newsletters, say how we do things, things like that to make sure people are doing the right thing and following policies assigned to users. Now, with good training, it improves compliance with standards and policies and procedures. Also guidelines too. So it's always good to make sure that you have at least the majority of your staff trying to do the right thing. And when there's like say a phishing test or a security test, um, you know, you need to hold the them responsible for updating training. Make sure they get their updated training. Maybe have remedial training provided for them also. Top executives. Just because you're the big boss doesn't mean you can bypass security and get things done because, I say so. That doesn't cut it. anymore. Uh, the rules are for everyone, and you need to make sure that uh, it's enforced. If all employees have to follow it, that includes all the way up to the CEO, up to the point where they threaten to fire you. That is, of course. So the phase of incident response are preparation. Yes, we're prepared for anything. All right, so something might happen. So we're going to have that detection and analysis. At that point, we're going to look into containment, eradication, and recovery. And we're going to keep going through that like circle until we have it all done, the containment, the eradication, and recovery happening. And then we do a post-incident follow-up. And once we follow up from that, we understand what we learned and what we need to learn. And therefore, we can move forward after that. So, the concepts again are when we have these systems, the fail secure is probably the one we want to have. So, this reverts to the system where little or no harm is likely to happen. Uh, Depending on the situation, the fail secure state can be fail open or fail close, but it's better to choose a fail secure, which means, hey, I'm going to still go by the last policy that was given to me, and I'm not going to accept any new changes in there or any of that. That's basically what fail secure does. Fail open means, oh no, I have a failure. All right, the doors are open, you know. And an example of this, a fail open situation, let's say there's a fire alarm that happens in your building, and everyone needs to use those fire exits. Uh, where I work currently, I have to badge in and go through a turnstile that is, one of these glass tube turnstile things that I hate, but I have to go through that in and out of my building. And at fail open state, when there was a fire alarm, they have these fire doors next to these turnstile that we have to go through, and these revolving doors. And they open these doors to all the entrances and exits, and we all just kind of went out that way. We went to, well, basically what I did is I went, everybody was mustering in the parking lot. I went to the parking garage, and I just got in my car and left because I was on a work call, and I, you know, did the unsafe thing. I quickly grabbed my laptop because I only just keep my laptop there at work, and I don't really keep anything else unpacked. I just grabbed my laptop, threw it in my backpack, and picked up and walked out the door and went home and worked from home the rest of that day. So that's an instance where you see a fail open situation, where you're allowed to allow people to leave the buildings and all that. A fail close situation is a way you prevent things from being closed, unlocked, and all that. So let's say if your firewall fails closed, uh, it totally goes dark. No new traffic is allowed in. All existing traffic is terminated, and uh, it's basically a brick until we get something fixed. Uh, Now, a failed close situation and a real thing could be an active shooter situation where everything becomes locked. All right, so if you are in an office building and we have a active shooter situation occurring, then every door should be fail close and then it should be automatically locked. Uh, that way, the shooter would be contained in a locked space and would not have the ability to, maybe moving from one location to another. That is one philosophy of a fail close, and they can only be open as they are cleared. So that is something that would happen in a emergency or compromise. Security assessments and testing. This is where you kind of judge, test, and evaluate your solution. The first thing we want to do is configuration scan to make sure, it's basically checking the system settings and all that. Uh, we had these at places, sometimes they're called health checks. And you just kind of run the configuration against your automated checklist, which validates it. Um, you can also sometimes check and say, so you missed a vendor patch or something. Those can be installed or missing for that. You can do vulnerability scans. Some of the vulnerability scans that I like to run on my personal networks are to show my exploitable weaknesses. As a Nessus scan, they can, you can get Kali Linux and run a Nessus scan on your internal networks to see what vulnerabilities you might have that you totally forgot about were running in the background on your personal lab networks or something. So those are some things you can do. You can do penetration testing. This is kind of known as ethical hacking. This is where you use tools like Metasploit, Nessus, Netcat, and NetScan. All these things to kind of, find out and fingerprint vulnerabilities and see if you can gain access to systems without using proper username and password methodology. And then you should always do a post-mortem assessment review, which is what went good, what went bad, what can be improved. All right, and there's some things out there for post-mortem review that way. All right, here's an example of a Nessus scan that was done. Nessus is a free tool that you can download. If you have something more, you have an enterprise, you can go with something like Qualys. And those are something you could utilize for that. But as you can see here, you can see like there's SSL, there's signing weak, provides a number of different things. TLS version was weak. A lot of different things you can find out there on that system. So, all right, as we go into change management and compliance auditing. Change management is a process to where you have to where changes to systems or configurations. You kind of provide the format consideration on how a system may affect other systems. You have your change, your playbook, your steps documented, your checklist documented on what's going to happen during that. You're going to present this to a change control board, which could be senior engineers, architects, managers, those with a lot of experience in the industry to make sure your methodology is sound. They might not be an expert in your product, but the process and procedures are sound for that implementation, and they will provide you with a permit to either go or no go. Next, we have compliance auditing, and this is an assessment that judges how well the organization is doing with meeting its own policy, its goals, and requirements. So, yep, we have a policy that says no passwords should, all passwords must be 12 characters long, and all passwords must be memorized, and none of them must be written on sticky notes and attached to the monitor. Well, let's say they go around, do the monitoring. Yay, everything passes. Everyone has 12. They check the system. Everyone there's a requirement that only allows passwords to be 12 characters. Boo, you met that one. Next thing they do, they kind of walk around quietly your office and check to see how many passwords were written on sticky notes. That were just attached to monitors or under mouse pads or whatever. And they catch all those. And they determine, okay, you're being audited or not. So they look at those, and that's part of their investigation. That's just an example of it. A lot of times they sit with you with a big clipboard of a checklist, and they go down these things, and you have to either say yes, you're compliant, or and how you're compliant with that, and they write it down and they put a check in the box, and they put a note that's sufficient or insufficient, or could be improved, etc. These are things that they do by that checklist, because when they first come in, they ask to see your policies, your policy pages, and they review your policies for all that stuff. So those are some things they do when you're being audited by a regulator or assessor and all that. So Next, we have network security troubleshooting, and this is aimed at recovering from the problems related to countermeasures. So a lot of times you implement IDS, IPS, and then legitimate traffic gets blocked. Well, this is aimed at recovering from those problems. So you go in there and you kind of like look at there, you triage the problem, you decide, you know, what are the issues of imminent concern, and then you create a technique, for how to patch that. You say, all right, we can go in here and change that patch or change the update to our rules to allow this. It may be just to create an exception. It may just say, okay, uh, the built-in software is detecting this traffic incorrectly. So we may need to contact the vendor and have them notify that this signature of this traffic should be allowed because that is legitimate traffic that's being passed. So you have to determine what preventative technique will be done to be used to be implemented. Then you have the serious concerns arise when the configurations are not easily fixed. Like, I can't exempt it. The system won't allow me to, or uh, the vendor says, too bad. We're not going to change it. We're not going to update that signature file. And then you're like, okay, so these are some concerns because this is affecting business and it's going to be something that needs to be addressed. This may need to be addressed by changing products altogether. And like I said, this is a serious concern when you have to uh, budget for new products that are in the millions plus. And then often you want to look to see whether the intruder can use these kind of mechanisms to bypass security or some kind of restriction out there and determine you know, if what happened by accident could happen on purpose. So those are some things you have to evaluate during these things. So in summary, we've talked about best practices for network security management, network security management tools, preventing and deterring incidents, incident response, network security assessments, testing, and troubleshooting. We'll cover those at high levels out there. So thank you, and remember to email me if you want your final exam review. Send it to me, and I will make sure you get a copy of it for your final exam next week. Thank you.